They called it the March into the Belly of the Beast, a campaign so ruthless, so personal, it's been scrubbed from the victor's tales and buried in the ashes of the South. This is the story history doesn't want you to hear. William Tecumseh Sherman didn't just wage war, he weaponized terror. His army of 60,000 carved a path of vengeance through the Confederate heartland, not for glory, but for reckoning. South Carolina, birthplace of secession, spark of the Civil War, would burn. But why did Sherman's rage burn hotter here than anywhere else? And what dark truths did soldiers bury in the smoke? This wasn't strategy. This was punishment. Towns renamed Burnwell, plantations stripped to skeletons, a capital city reduced to embers by men drunk on fury and whiskey. But behind the myth of the brute lies a darker question. Was Sherman a monster or a prophet? The scars are still here, in the scorched earth, in the whispers of unwritten orders, and in the chilling truth that Sherman's march didn't just end a war, it rewrote the soul of a nation. Strap in, you've only heard the myth. Tonight, we march into the belly of the beast. But before we begin, be sure to like and subscribe to our channel to support our community. William Tecumseh Sherman's rise through the ranks seemed almost unimaginable. After leading a brigade at Bull Run's chaotic first battle, he climbed to become the 7th highest-ranking brigadier general of volunteers by August 7, 1861, outranking future President Ulysses S. Grant by 11 positions. Yet his career nearly unraveled in Kentucky, where journalists painted him as erratic and unhinged. Salvation came via Henry Halleck, who transferred him to St. Louis and secured him command of a division. At Shiloh, Sherman steered his troops through near catastrophe, earning a promotion to Major General by May 1862. Over the next year, he spearheaded pivotal campaigns along the Mississippi, seizing Chickasaw Bluffs, storming Arkansas Post, and crushing Vicksburg. When Grant ascended to General-in-Chief, Sherman took charge of the Western Theater, orchestrating the Meridian Campaign before embarking on his defining Georgia offensive. On May 7, 1864, his forces trudged 130 grueling miles from Chattanooga to Atlanta, a 128-day grind ending in the city's capture on September 2nd. More than a battlefield triumph, Atlanta's fall reshaped the political landscape, bolstering Lincoln's re-election bid. Never one to rest, Sherman launched his defining maneuver on November 16th, the March to the Sea. Over 36 days, his army carved a 275-mile scar through Georgia, ravaging a 40 to 60-mile swath before seizing Savannah on December 21st. Rather than join Grant in Virginia, Sherman pivoted northward. With approval from command, he turned his fury toward the Carolinas, a reckoning for the states many Northerners viewed as the Confederacy's ideological heart. South Carolina, birthplace of secession, became his next target. Its impending occupation symbolized not just military conquest, but a bitter settling of scores. South Carolina, the cradle of secession and the war's first shots, bore the brunt of Northern fury. To Union troops, the state symbolized 4 years of bloodshed and suffering, and in Savannah, soldiers hungered for payback. Their commander shared the sentiment. Writing to Henry Halleck on Christmas Eve, 1864, Sherman confessed his army's insatiable desire to wreak vengeance upon the Palmetto State. "I almost tremble at her fate," he added, "but she deserves it." Earlier, he'd lobbied Grant. Crushing South Carolina would weaken Lee in Virginia and satisfy a nation eager to see the state devastated as Georgia was. This campaign wasn't just strategy, it was personal. While Sherman's march to the sea had been harsh but impersonal, South Carolina faced a fiercer reckoning. "If we don't purify her, it's because we can't get a light," quipped an Illinois soldier. Civilians braced for the storm. A teenage diarist in Columbia wrote of dread toward Sherman the Brute, who vowed to turn their homeland into a wilderness. The general weaponized fear itself, coolly noting to Grant that foes respect my name. Grant, initially planning to ship Sherman's army to Virginia within 2 months, pivoted. A Carolina strike could disorganize the South faster. He bolstered Sherman by securing Savannah with the 19th Corps and redirecting Schofield's 23rd Corps to seize Wilmington, then push inland. Once railroads to Goldsboro were rebuilt, Schofield's 20,000 would join Sherman for the final drive north. But logistics loomed. Sherman recalled South Carolina's swampy lowlands from his early military days, a memory that proved prophetic. Relentless rains flooded roads and swelled rivers, delaying his advance by weeks. Success now hinged on his pioneer corps, engineers tasked with rebuilding routes under punishing conditions. Meanwhile, Confederates scrambled. General Beauregard cobbled together defenses, relying on Lieutenant General William J. Hardee's 8,000 men, fresh from evacuating Savannah, to stall Sherman's wrath. Beauregard's patchwork defenses stretched thin, 3,000 militia guarding Charleston, 6,500 under Braxton Bragg at Wilmington, and Major General Daniel Harvey Hill's force blocking Sherman's path inland with cavalry and Georgia troops barred from crossing state lines. The general also scraped together remnants of the shattered Army of Tennessee, once 40,000 strong, now barely 11,000, and pleaded for reinforcements. Lee, desperate, sent South Carolinian Wade Hampton and a cavalry division south, though crumbling railroads made mobilization a nightmare. At best, Beauregard could muster 30,000 against Sherman's eventual 70,000. Sherman's advance, delayed by torrential rains, finally lurched forward in early February. Mimicking his Georgia strategy, he split his army into 2 wings. Slocum's left wing feinted toward Augusta, while Howard's right wing menaced Charleston. Both converged secretly on Columbia, the capital, 130 miles north. Nature fought harder than Confederates. Record rainfall turned roads into rivers, stalling Slocum for 10 days until his troops crossed the Savannah on February 5th. Howard's men fared slightly better. Part of his force sailed to Beaufort before slogging inland through flooded lowlands they nicknamed Frog's Heaven. Sherman's men waded through a drowned world, water chest deep, roads churned into sludge. With forage scarce, the army dragged 2,500 wagons, 600 ambulances, and 68 guns across 25 miles of quagmire. Pioneers clawed paths forward, laying corduroy roads of felled logs to keep the advance alive. Confederates gaped at their speed. "I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't seen it," admitted William Hardee. Joseph Johnston marveled, "No such army existed since Caesar's." Even a captured rebel quipped, "Send Sherman's men to hell, they'd corduroy it and march on." Southern towns bore the storm first. Hardeeville vanished in flames. A New York sergeant described Robertsville as chimneys and ash heaps. Kilpatrick's cavalry torched Barnwell, dubbed Burnwell, leaving churches, schools, and homes smoldering. Dozens of villages like Orangeburg and Lexington met identical fates. Rumors swirled that Kilpatrick issued matches to his troops. A plantation mistress near Barnwell recounted looting soldiers tearing apart her home. They scattered feathers, smashed trunks, and gulped stolen liquor, maddened by greed. Columbia, a refined city swollen with refugees, never imagined itself a battleground. By 1865, its population had surged from 8,000 to 20,000, becoming both a sanctuary and a strategic prize. When Confederate cavalry under Joe Wheeler arrived on February 16th to defend it, they instead looted shops along Main Street before fleeing Sherman's advance with stolen goods. The next day, Union troops marched in. Sherman assured Mayor Thomas Goodwin of protection, a pledge shattered by nightfall. Exhausted Iowa soldiers, tasked with maintaining order, guzzled whiskey offered by locals. "Men were crazed beyond control," admitted General John Logan. Drunken troops staggered through streets, torching buildings amid howling winds. teenager Emma LeConte described the horror. Soldiers shouted curses, sang vile songs, and let flames climb. Blame erupted instantly. Confederates like Wade Hampton accused Sherman of systematic arson. Sherman countered that retreating rebels ignited cotton bales, sparking infernos. Historian Marion Lucas later dissected the disaster in Sherman and the burning of Columbia, concluding no single cause, just a storm of chaos, liquor, and embers carried by fate's breath. Columbia's inferno stemmed from a storm of factors: retreating Confederates torching cotton bales, high winds scattering embers, freed prisoners, and drunken soldiers fanning chaos. Union engineers like Captain Orlando Poe described scenes like hell itself, women and children fleeing as flames devoured 458 buildings. Sherman, while denying direct orders, coldly acknowledged the blaze hastened the war's end. Today, bronze stars pockmark the State House, silent witnesses to that night. As Columbia smoldered, Charleston fell. Sherman's forces severed the cradle of secession, ending a 567-day siege. By February 20th, his army pivoted north, feinting toward Charlotte while razing towns like Winnsboro. In camp, Sherman reportedly told officers, "When rebels defy law, answer with fire." Had we leveled Charleston in 61, this war would have died sooner. The Confederacy scrambled. Lee reinstated Joseph Johnston to counter Sherman, but morale crumbled. Only 4,000 of 11,000 expected Tennessee troops rallied in North Carolina. Others deserted to protect families in Sherman's wake. Johnston confided, "It's too late." As Sherman's army crossed into North Carolina, he tightened the leash. General Order No. 8 forbade looting homes, a stark shift from Georgia's scorched earth. But old habits lingered. Kilpatrick's cavalry razed mills and barns in Wadesboro, while officers turned blind eyes to plunder. Meanwhile, thousands of freed slaves trailed the columns. "Clinging to our skirts," Sherman grumbled, slowing his advance. Confederates seized fleeting chances to strike. At Monroe's Crossroads, Wade Hampton's dawn raid nearly captured Kilpatrick, who narrowly escaped in his nightshirt by tricking rebels into chasing a decoy. Though outgunned by Union Spencers, Hampton's men bloodied Sherman's vanguard before retreating, clearing the path to Fayetteville. Sherman stormed into the town on March 11th, brusquely dismissing a delegation. "Your people brought this war. Now reap its whirlwind." Behind him, refugees and stragglers swelled, chaos in his wake. Johnston, scrambling to rally troops in Charlotte, admitted defeat was inevitable. North Carolina, once a reluctant rebel, now faced Sherman's wrath, half restrained, half unleashed. Sherman's wrath fell hard on Fayetteville. After dismissing local pleas with a curt, "Blacks and cotton caused this war. I wish them both in hell," he obliterated the town's arsenal, leaving only rubble. "North Carolina forfeited our trust," he declared. Despite his orders to curb looting, troops ransacked the unrepentant town, while surrounding areas faced even fiercer pillaging. By March 15th, Sherman's forces crossed the Cape Fear River, splitting into wings under Howard and Slocum. Slocum's advance stalled at Averysboro, where Hardee's rearguard held firm for 2 days, creating a fatal gap. Seizing the chance, Johnston launched a desperate assault at Bentonville, the war's final major Confederate charge. Bragg's bungled flank attack squandered their momentum, and by nightfall, Union reinforcements reversed Southern gains. Though Johnston's 21,000 men briefly threatened Sherman's 60,000, Hardee's last-ditch counterattack saved a retreat route. Bentonville cost 3,440 Confederate and 1,527 Union lives. A resigned Johnston confessed to Lee, "I can only annoy him now." Sherman pushed onward, uniting with Schofield in Goldsboro on March 23rd. Ragged troops rejoiced at new uniforms and 514 sacks of long-awaited mail. Sherman then sailed to Virginia, joking he'd rescue Grant from fossilization. At City Point, the generals shared campfire tales before meeting Lincoln aboard the River Queen. The trio, war's architects, debated peace. Lincoln pleaded for no more bloodshed, but Sherman and Grant warned, "One fight remains." The unspoken question lingered, how to end a rebellion without crushing its soul. As Sherman's forces tightened their grip, Lincoln's vision for peace clashed with the raw reality of surrender. The president urged clemency. "Let them go home, officers and all. We want submission, not vengeance." Sherman carried these orders back to Goldsboro, where 90,000 Union troops loomed over North Carolina. Panicked, Governor Zebulon Vance fled Raleigh, shipping state archives west as former governors Swain and Graham negotiated with Sherman. Despite promises of protection, Wheeler's cavalry looted the abandoned capital before Kilpatrick's men marched in. A lone Texan lieutenant, Walsh, fired defiant shots at Kilpatrick, a final gasp of rebellion swiftly crushed. In Greensboro, chaos reigned. Jefferson Davis, trailing a crumbling government, clung to delusions of regrouping in Alabama. Johnston and Beauregard dismissed his plan. "Our people feel whipped," Johnston admitted. News of Lee's surrender at Appomattox shattered the room. By April 15th, Davis fled south in a wagon, while Sherman's troops skirmished at Morrisville and Chapel Hill. The war's last flickers. On April 17th, Sherman and Johnston met at Bennett Farm under white flags. In a cramped log cabin, they hashed out terms for surrendering 89,000 Confederates, the war's largest capitulation. Sherman, ever the pragmatist, had achieved Lincoln's goal, to end this with mercy, not fire. Sherman's march didn't just end at Bennett Farm. It etched a question into America's soul. Can mercy ever follow vengeance? They called him a brute, a prophet, the devil himself. But Sherman's true legacy isn't in the ashes. It's in the silence, the stories buried beneath Reconstruction's promises, the diaries never published, the orders never written. Was this a crusade to save a nation, or a warning to break one? Sherman himself confessed, "War is cruelty. You cannot refine it." But what happens when the war ends, and the cruelty doesn't? The scars are still here, in every debate over monuments, in every whispered lost cause, in every flame we pretend died in 1865. So tell me, was Sherman the hero who ended a war, or the architect of America's first total war? Comment below.